Okay, good evening, everybody. Real and unreal, virtual and physical. This is the July meeting of the AHSAQ, and I'll have a few things to talk about, but only a small few, not like last time. In the accidents and incidents, apart from I'm being told tonight that there's been an extra one I don't have on my list here, that two mustering helicopters have collided in the Kimberley. That's all I know. Yeah. Pitch black, I've had an Italian Eurofighter go down. But last...
Wasn't it a Dassault?
Was it
2000?
A Dassault 2000, was it? Right.
Yep.
Last month, I mentioned that chipmunk, that accident that happened in Perth, West Australia. The preliminary report is out, and extremely luckily, as he taxied out, the guy was doing some videoing, and they were able to identify the fact that the gypsy cowling wasn't locked. The the latches that you pull and turn were still in the vertical mode.
Oh.
And he'd forgotten about that. So when he put on the power, it flipped up. And I guess it became a bit of a wing, and he lost control of the aircraft. So, the simplest of things. You get distracted at the last minute and forget to do something. You've just checked the oil and you close it down and somebody comes up, hey, John, and that's it. The PA-31 350 Hotel Juliet Echo, which did a forced landing short of Archerfield here when was it? April 23. He put it down beside the railway line, if you remember, and there was quite a bit of photography of that. He ran out of fuel 11 kilometres short of the airfield. He was also probably overtired. He worked all day on one job, then flew the aircraft to Sydney with a load of cargo, and it flew it back again. And it was just coming in just short of dawn. So those are the two things that have been put out so far on that. And the first solo at Camden, the Cessna that crashed at Camden on downwind, young chap on his first solo. He had flying time in ultralights, and this was his first Cessna flight. They can't say so, but it looks very much like it was a suicide. They can't prove it, but the only way the aircraft could have done what it did was if somebody pushed the control column forward and not only held it forward, but considering that the thing was probably almost that the trim was set for cruise, so the faster it went going downhill, the more it was trying to pull up, and the guy would have had to been pushing harder and harder all the way down. And he apparently did not do that. And he went in at about 60 degrees, which is, and there's some photographs that were taken on the ground from quite a distance away, but it was like that. And I'm told, though I've never tried it, that dive bombing, which feels vertical, is done really at about 60 degrees. So I can't see how it could have been anything else other than suicide. There's a new airline out, Minres Air, only turned up in the last recent. It's Mineral Resources' own airline. They're fed up with Qantas out of Perth. They've been mucked about all the time, delayed. And so they have now purchased, or maybe on long-term lease, I don't know, an A319. They're going to have 4 of them, and they're flying. This one was VHP, ex-Tiger Air Singapore and Philippine Airlines from 2009 vintage, and it's operating out of Brisbane. They're going to they go to Wodgina, which is Port Hedland, lithium mine, and Kensborough mine sites out of Brisbane, so that they'll be able to take one crew out, take the off crew up and bring them in. The Alaska Airlines 737 MAX 9 that blew the plug out, Boeing bought it back off them. Whether that's the correct way to put it, or whether Alaska Airlines sold it to them, but either way, it's gone back to Boeing, and they'll get and they'll have a replacement for that. And one of the things that I found particularly interesting, DC2 VH Charlie Delta Zulu CDZ from Bankstown days. It's now at Haas, and to be restored to static display. There have been a number of attempts to restore that aircraft over the years, but if anybody can do it, Haas will do it. And that is all of the news I've got. If anybody else has got anything beyond that, they might let us know at the question time afterwards. And so I would like to introduce our guest speaker tonight, who, I'll have to just check on this, is doing Air Transportable Mobile Medical Facility. And the speaker is Denis Baker, who's one of us.
Good evening.
Yours, it's all yours.
Good evening, everybody, and the Zoom people. Okay, some of you know my background. I'm a CAC person from way back. I started in 1972 as a young cadet engineer and progressed up to a ground and flight test engineer with the company. And during that time, I was given the opportunity to project manage a RAF special project, and that's what I hope to talk about and cover tonight, which is Air Transportable Mobile Medical Facility. So we were tasked with designing and developing 2 of these to prove the concept that was developed by a RAF nurse, Judy Robson was her name, and she operated in Vietnam, and she was sick of tents and containers and things like that, and came up with this idea of developing an air transportable facility that could be used for medical. So that's what I'd like to talk about tonight. Okay, so Air Transportable Mobile Medical Facility, and I'm sorry there's a typo there. The last letter should be F, not T, but these things creep in from time to time. And there's a picture of the team of people at CAC in 1988, 89 that put these together along with several draftsmen. And so I'd like to just sort of go through that and give some explanation about this project. So my time, I started at CAC in 1972. I was in the second year of my mechanical engineering degree at the time and employed as a junior cadet engineer in the aircraft structures department. And during that time within engineering, we had this fantastic facility that new people would move through all different departments within engineering. So I went through process engineering, project engineering, the drawing office, photography, printing, the test department, And it was that time in the test department that I found a niche that I loved very much, and ended up staying there and moved on into ground and flight testing. And after I gained that experience, I was then given this opportunity in 1988 to project manage the Air Transportable Medical Facility. So 1985, Hawker de Havilland took over CAC, and we became Hawker de Havilland Victoria Limited. And then in October 88, HTHV was awarded a contract for 2 of these air transportable mobile medical facility, and I'll call them just medical facilities, right? And the concept was that 2 of these together could make a hard-walled, air-conditioned facility for medical people, and the 2 of them together could hold 32 stretcher patients. So quite a remarkable capability. And as I said, the concept came out of Vietnam experience, and that's supposed to be a RAF nurse, not a FAF nurse. And we set up the project in what was called the Butler Hangar at CAC. Some of you may know of the Butler Hangar or the flight hangar at CAC, where all the key things were done for testing and everything. So it was what we called our mini skunk works at CAC. All the unusual things that happened at the company occurred within the hangar. It was an isolated area away from the rest of the factory, so we could secure it, and it had a full ICARA handling system in the hangar at one stage, and Navy people used to come to the hangar to train, and the test department would maintain the hydraulics and the system. But the hangar was used for, right back in the early days, the building and testing of the CA-15 fighter, the testing of the Sabre fuselage. There was a beautiful big set of double floor beams that you could mount a full rack off and a fuselage. So we did a lot of things in there, and because of that isolation, we had workshops, machining, so we could do everything within that. And the decision was made to then set up the test department as the little area to build these 2 prototype medical facilities. And the design parameters in here, these are the main parameters. So first of all, it had to be air transportable beneath a heavy lift helicopter. So therefore that meant it had 4 lift points on the top 4 corners of the structure. It had to be towable behind all ADF vehicles up to 100 kilometres an hour. And it had air assist braking and 24-volt lighting. So Jeeps, Unimogs, trucks could tow these things. And the idea was when they came out of a Hercules or from underneath a helicopter, you could then use a Jeep to move them around and set them up to come together. And as I progress through this, you'll get an idea of how it functioned. The other design parameter was it had to have an airbag suspension for off-road operation, and it included 4-wheel disc brakes and Ackerman steering. So Ackerman steering is common steering on cars where the inside wheel on the turn turns sharper than the outside wheel. So we had to design all that into the vehicle. It had to carry, be fitted with an integral Sigma Department of Public Works, Defence, air conditioning to maintain positive internal air pressure so that when there were patients with inside, the dust and other things wouldn't come into the structure. Connections for 240 volt and 415 volt to be connected to standard ADF generators. It had to be hard-walled to improve medical environment as compared to tents and things like that. It had to be designed to interconnect both side-to-side and end-to-end configurations. And as we progress through this, you'll see what I mean by all that. And that ability to interconnect on a variety of land surface conditions like sand and hilly country meant that we had to design a set of ramps that were adjustable, that positioned these two vehicles side by side, spaced correctly. The two units had to be air transportable together inside a C-130 Hercules, including the external generator and these portable ramps inside a single aircraft. Each corner of the unit had to have a detachable fiberglass service module that could be pre-packaged, mounted on each corner for storage of equipment and accessible from inside of the facility, so that when they were setting these up for transshipment, a module could be pre-packed and then put on it. So whether it was medical or whatever facility you were going to use it for, that was another requirement. It also had to be, both of them had to be top loadable onto a 40-foot shipping container for sea freight operations. And it had to have an integral battery-powered winch to allow operation by two people. So two people could set up each one of these to then put them together to make a field hospital in this particular case. And this is an example of the brochure that Hawker de Havilland developed at the time in our facility in the Butler hangar, or the flight hangar. So I'll just quickly go through that, and later on I've got an example of that here that I'll pass around for people to look at and for the Zoom people. And so here we have the configuration. So you can see side by side and end to end. That was the design parameter and specifications that came with it. So back to our little mini skunk works in the flight hangar, we had a small design and manufacturing office directly within the test department. So the production line was directly beside the design office. Very important, because the flight hangar or Butler hangar was located a long way from the engineering design office at CAC, and you didn't want to have to walk from the drawing office, design office, backwards and forwards, just not efficient. Production line was therefore right beside things. It was large space because of a very large hangar, because the units were 7 metres long, 3.7 metres wide, 2.1 metre high, on top of a 15-inch four-wheeled air suspension. So it took up a lot of space. That same facility was used for the development of the Barra sonobuoy that I previously spoke about. As I said, the Sabre fuselage was tested in there. The CA-15 was manufactured and tested within the flight hangar. So very historic, great capability. Back to the unit itself, it was based on a welded chassis of aluminium extrusions. Floors, walls and roof were composite aluminium paper-filled panels made in the USA. So this is a concept of how the two units side by side would work. And it's just repetitive. Yep. And there we have a picture of one of the two final units that we finished. And so you can see 15-inch wheels, airbag suspension, double wishbone structure. These are the fiberglass modules. And again, fiberglass 88 was very low key, and we had to develop molds and all those sort of things. And interconnection. So here, like those train interconnection trams, we had to take one of those to give us end-to-end connection. And then these were all of the hinges and flaps on the sides, where this particular side, that flap would fold up, and this complete area would fold down to form a floor to the next shelter that was beside it. Once we developed them, this was the configuration. So here you see the ramps on jacks at each end. So we raise those and then level the two of them for the two sides of wheels for the unit. And then we would interconnect the other set of ramps and jacks and with a space bar, and then that put the two units exactly in the right position to fold a wall down to form an interconnecting floor. And then on the other unit, we would fold up a wall to create a roof. And then there were end panels inside each unit that could fold out to fill the void. And then you had a complete hard-walled shelter. And you can sort of see with the team, so there's the end that folded out. And to stabilise the height and everything, we had these jacks that dropped down out of the extrusion, the vertical extrusion, so that we could then level each unit on the four corners and prepare it all together, get it off the airbag suspension, because when you're walking around inside, the airbag suspension would move too much. So here you can see ramps that enabled us to winch each unit up onto their set of ramps. And if we wanted to, if we had another set, we could then interconnect the two of them here and put another set of ramps and a third shelter to then create another expansion inside. And some of the things we had to allow for in the design was we had to take standard C-130 litter bollards that supported the litters inside the aircraft, modify them and fit them into these units. So we had to then put in inserts in the floor panels and the roof panels to set up. And that configuration there enabled us to fit 32 litter patients in air-conditioned comfort. So a great facility. Yes, that's me in the green tie. Haven't changed much, have I? 1988, 89. Yeah. So I'm just a young fella.
Is that Leon McCoubrey on the left?
Yeah. So Leon McCoubrey,
Yeah.
Peter Foden. So Peter Foden
Foden,
was the chief test engineer. So he
the
led.
Coat.
So that's Peter Foden.
Peter Foden, yeah.
Yep. He was the chief test engineer, and Leon McCoubrey over here, he was 2IC. And then we've got Ian Taylor. Ian is still alive in Melbourne, and Ian taught himself to weld, and he welded the whole aluminium structure of both units and everything aluminium on there, that ramps and jacks and all that sort of stuff. And the other guys were, I've got their names, but I won't mention them at the moment. So that was the configuration. Here you can see the air leads that connected to the truck, and then this was the power to allow all the lights to work on the unit when it was being towed. So all those were standard military spec connections that would then connect to a Jeep, a truck, a Unimog, whatever. Then as part of the testing, I must acknowledge RAF Heritage here. I put out a request for information that they had, and they found this particular file, which was Air Mobility Test and Development Unit in RAF Richmond. And they were tasked on the 16th of March, 1988, to then test these two units for fitment into a Hercules. And we couldn't find the detail. Unfortunately, filing systems are not all that crash hot because it was pre-computer things, and we couldn't find the test reports that should have been an outcome of that process. But that confirmed that the design would fit into a C-130 with all the right required clearances, tie downs and all those sort of things. And then we went field trials. We had to prove it on field trials. So this was at Cabramurra, up near the Kosciuszko National Park. And so we moved the two units to Fairburn, and I think I've got a shot. So we moved them down to Fairburn, used a Unimog to then tow them to Cabramurra, which is about 70 or 80 kilometres, maybe 100 kilometres, so that we proved that they could be towed at 100 kilometres an hour, and filmed all that. But unfortunately, all those film records and everything are buried within the records of CAC down at Moorabbin. So I wasn't able to dig those out, but they'll come eventually. And back to the field trials. So we had a camouflage netting. The other thing we had to design was a sun tent over the top to reduce the solar input into the structure. And that had special posts that fitted into special slots in the roof, and we could set that up. And back to these ramps, the design meant that we had to clip them on the side of the unit. So down one side on each unit, two of them, and that had to be liftable by two people up onto the side of the unit for transportation purposes. And then you can sort of see the slope. Those set of ramps are quite low, and this one is high. So the whole idea was to show that we could put them together, move them around in different locations, and demonstrate capability so that the combination could just about go anywhere. And they had to be in a position where two persons could lift. Now, remember, they were paper-filled composite, aluminium, and aluminium extrusions on the side. So they had to be a two-man lift. And I think on the back of the Unimog is a generator. And there were other stores that we took with us for that particular exercise. And I think that's me from memory. So that's the configuration. That's what we did for testing. Let me just move on a little bit. This is some further research that I haven't been able to open the accession files, but within here, Peter, you'll see some names here. So one was contracts awarded to Hawker de Havilland Victoria. The one on the left is, the top one is the license to Hawker de Havilland Limited. to manufacture and sell air transportable mobile medical facilities. And then the lower one there is contracts office advice concerning ownership rights to mobile medical field facility designed by Wing Commander Robson. And then on the right-hand side, we have Judith Robson, service number, date of birth, 1941, Canberra, and conflict was Vietnam. So this confirms that Judith was the person that came up with the concept, and then we had to take that concept and put it into an overall design to fit the parameters. So quite an extensive exercise. Maybe somebody knows where Judith might be. One of these days, I hope to get in touch with her. But one of my tasks will be to open these accession files and see what's there. And for those that know about the National Archives, that's what you've got when you're given when you're trying to find things, and they open a world of information. But unfortunately, they arrived too late for me to get through the process. The other reference that I like to bring up from time to time, and I'll hold this one up, is for those who like to do a bit of research, the CAC book, We're Away to Hornet, is a really good book. I was heavily involved in collecting information together to help Brian Hill to put that together. And it's a great story of how they progressed and made it happen. Other things that I have in the collection is my collection. This is a 50th anniversary booklet on CAC, and it shows the project, things like that. You're welcome to have a look at these guys. As every aircraft came off the production line, they came down to the flight hangar. They were towed down to the flight hangar, prepped, and then taken off the runway at CAC. And that was where the CA-15, which is here, was put together and tested. So very, very historic. And that hangar now it got moved to another location in Victoria. I can't remember where it is. But you're welcome to have a look at those things. And I have the brochure as well, if you'd like to have a look at that in more detail. So that really summarises the project. Question?
What was the all-up weight of the facility? I'm thinking how much above that was surplus for the aircraft's all-up weight?
The actual weight of the unit, of each one of these units, was, let me just find it, empty 2,500 kilos, and with a payload up to 1,500 extra kilos. So total of 4,000 kilos, and the Herc was not a problem.
Right.
Yeah.
Took it easily. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Very easily. Yeah.
While I've got the microphone,
Yes, Bob.
how many of these were actually produced for the RAF beyond the prototypes?
None.
What a bugger.
Yep. And the 2 units, from what I was able to determine, went to pitch black 91 and pitch black 90. What's the next one after 9? 2 years. 2 years apart. So 93, I think it was. And then they disappeared. Nobody can tell
Nobody
me.
knows where they are.
No. So
Fell off the back of the truck.
don't know. I don't know. But yeah. So one of the other ongoing tasks that I've set myself is to contact Pitch Black organisers and see whether I can go back through records and see whether there's photos and things like that to determine that and add that to that heritage, the RAF heritage collection on this.
Just a quick question was how long did it take to set up from arrival time to operational time for the 2 units?
About 30 minutes. We had a very tight time. So you had to bring the 2 and you basically put them into the area, like on that, Peter, can we go back to the display? So we were given the task that we had to arrive on location, and within 30 minutes, we had to have that fully set up. Generator running, air conditioning running, ready to go to take litter patients.
It's amazing.
Not involved how many people you said 2 for the ramps, but what was the total team for the setup?
2.
Just still the 2?
Yep.
They would have been busy people for 30
Yes,
minutes.
they would. Yep.
Anybody else internally here?
First, let me say, in my experience, something like that would get an army evaluation as well. And army tend to take the lowest common denominator. So if I can criticize that, army would look at that and say, no, that's too luxurious. We live, you know the story about stars.
Yep.
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 You know, Air Force uses stars to count their hotels. Army live under the stars. So they would look at something like that and say, well, we've got to go from the tent environment to this and then back again. No, tent. But a technical question. Well, when you packed it for Hercules, I assume you would just fill it full of stretchers, equipment.
Correct.
So,
yep.
You know, you can imagine something like that going packed to go. You wouldn't waste any space or any weight.
And you wouldn't have all those additional bits and pieces outside of each unit inside the aircraft, which are risk.
That's right. You have it all secured inside.
Yeah.
No, it's a neat design. I want to know where I can get one from you for the museum.
Dennis, a generator. You'd need a generator to power that. So that's something else that has to go in a Hercules.
Correct. Yeah.
But it hooked onto the front, didn't it?
Well, no, the generator was a separate item. So it would go on the floor in the Herc and be strapped down like they normally would. So you'd have to empty the fuel out of it and
get transported.
And carry it into the Herc in front of the 2 units and strap it down and then winch the 2 units in. Because they had winches integral under the floor, you could then use that winch to winch each one up into the air, and you didn't have to use another vehicle to put it into the Hercules.
Yes. So it is a complete unit in itself.
Yes.
The facility plus generator all in the one aircraft.
Correct.
Ready to assemble and go.
Yeah. And be in the field on a rough field very quickly. And from the time of location, 30 minutes, you had to be set up to take at least 32 litter patients.
Okay, Zoom questions, please.
Joe Vella. Hi, Dennis. Joe Vella.
Hi, Joe.
Yeah. How you going? Good. When you say 2 units were built, does that mean 4 buildings or just 2 buildings?
No, 2 buildings.
You say 2 units.
Yeah,
sorry?
2 units. 2 units.
Yeah.
So
meaning
two combined to make. So you saw the 2 units.
Yeah.
Yeah. They joined together to form one entity to
one
take.
set.
Yeah.
One set. So
correct.
that's all that was built. That's it.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
We've heard about the ability to transport this in multiple ways, but we haven't seen any photos. Did you get to test slinging it under a helicopter? Did you get to test rolling it into a Hercules?
No, we didn't, unfortunately. As I said, the RAF's AMTDU did the testing for air transportability, and we weren't party to that because we were a contractor, and therefore it's very difficult to get on base and do those sort of things. So we used a crane to do a heavy lift demonstration at the factory. But again, all those photographic records are buried within the CAC archive at Moorabbin. And once that progresses, I'll then add that information to the collection to further add to it.
And 100 years before you, the famous engineer Isambard Kingdom Brunel designed a field hospital that went to the Crimea, and obviously not air transportable, but similar concept, modular, versatile, and it was one of his less known achievements.
Maybe you could send me an email about that information. I'd be very interested in that. And the discussion earlier about Army, the reason why it was hard-walled, so if there was an explosion nearby on shrapnel, because it was aluminium panel with paper core, basically shrapnel would get captured. But we never did test all those sort of things because nobody wanted to blow them up.
Was there, or has there been any other country that's taken up this concept, such as the American services, who of course have unlimited funds available to them?
The Americans have container-based systems for field hospitals. And look, in the marketing process, we did approach the Americans and nothing came of it.
Shades of MASH.
And shortly after the units were demonstrated at Cabramurra and given the big tick, Army bought tents, inflatable tents for their field hospital. So when those sort of things happen, you haven't got a chance. Any other questions in Zoom land?
Yeah, we have a air transportable hospital at Ambly. The last time it was fully deployed with floods in Pakistan 5 or so years ago.
Right.
And it's a tent-based system, but it's a hospital. It's a whole hospital.
Yeah.
Every now and again on the base, they will roll out parts of it and erect them under the trees and whatnot. I assume as much as anything just to practice doing it.
Yes.
And right now the headquarters are working on a display for us down at our museum. We don't know what it will be or whether it will be current equipment or historic equipment.
Right.
I'll keep you informed.
Well, if we could find them, they'd be a great display, because that was the whole idea. You build multiple ones and you could have a big unit, 5 or 6 of them interconnected and end for end. When they're end for end, you then have a little air gap between them with a concertina that joins the little walkway, and therefore you could isolate segments. So you could have a row of 5 and then connect at either end and have another set of 5, and you could have 2 wards. And that was the whole process. Yeah.
But generally speaking, those hospitals are Army hospitals. The RAF has one at Ambly because we have the transport facility there. So I'd be very surprised if it's not identical to an Army configuration hospital.
Probably is.
But it's at Ambly, and we practice, RAF practices assembling and putting it together because, they've got the mode of transport.
Yeah.
I've got other stories about the RAF Army experience in Korea, where medical air evacuation only worked at its best when the last ward that the patient went into before they went into an aeroplane was run by RAF.
Yep. Because
the RAF nurses were qualified and skilled in preparing and assessing the wounded, but prior to going onto the aircraft, and they would care for them that way to prepare them for flight in unpressurized cold aeroplanes.
Yeah. And that's where Judith learnt her or gained her experience and came up with this concept. And it's amazing that her experience in Vietnam came with this idea, and then we had to turn it into something solid. And very, very difficult because lead times, we had to order all these composite panels from America and convince the Americans to sell us that sort of stuff, get it into the country, and then we had to machine them and put extrusions into them. And sometimes they weren't consistent with their dimensional stability. So it was very, very difficult. Yeah. Another question?
And the statement is more around Judith Robson's. That's a story within itself, I think. The political skill that she had to actually sell the concept, because we're not talking of a couple of dollars here by what I've seen so far.
Yeah.
So her ability to be able to sell that concept and get it through to obviously
Oh yeah, she had great support from Air Force. Yeah, senior people.
All right. Well,
All right,
thank
Bob.
you. I think that wraps it up.
Thank you.